Hi, I'm Jo Kane and welcome to One on One, where I'm talking to Andrew Holden, who has just returned from Sydney, where his newspaper, The Press, is the newspaper of the year. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Jo.
And what does that mean to you?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's a real thrill for everybody. It's a pretty tough one to win. It covers Australasia, so Australia and New Zealand, and up into Asia as well. So one of the competitors against us was the Wall Street Journal's Asia edition. So to take them on and show what the paper can do, particularly in difficult circumstances, and to beat them, because newspapers are different in different parts of the world. So it's just reiterates what the staff have done. It shows that the pride we've got in what we've done is matched by the industry, so it's a great thrill. Do
you think that when we think about this last year, and it's not only been earthquakes, we've had Pike River, we had 9 that were killed in a plane accident, we had that big snow down south, and the role that the press has played in that to try and keep, say, the standards in publishing. You've had members trapped, you had a member killed, you've had your staff relocated. Does something like this, in terms of the professionalism they show, is that helping them as they work through their personal circumstances and the business of publishing a paper?
Yeah, it does. It does, because what it says to the staff is that they're being noticed for what they're doing, their resilience and their determination by the industry, and they're getting the recognition that what they've been doing is outstanding. And I think everybody in this city, whatever their circumstances, everybody needs that positive confirmation, don't they? That, however you're coping with the circumstances, you're doing a fantastic job.
Yeah, no, it's really important. I guess that what I see is that the news, and in particular the press in Canterbury's context, is not only a conduit for the news, but it actually has a very important role in information. Yeah. Is that proving difficult?
It depends on what source of information you're talking about. Yeah, it has been difficult. I mean, to me, it's been fascinating, really, and particularly since, really since last September, isn't it? In that, what we've found is that information can be really basic stuff. I mean, one of the most popular things we've done this year was to publish a map of the sewerage system, and showing where it works and where it didn't work, so that people had a sense of, whether they should be using the Portaloos or not. In fact, people wanted us to run that, again and larger. It's the really basic things that become so important in a situation like that. What's been frustrating is to get hold of maps and that sort of information with any level of detail. It's been very difficult, I think, for the authorities to be able to come across and say, look, this is really what's happening, this is the state of the system, so that we can tell you. So even that level of information becomes vital. Then when you get up into your political sphere, in terms of what the decisions are being made at government level, well, that's always difficult.
Well, and as you try to work your way forward, you seem to have the ire of Minister Brownlee. He's called you irresponsible, and he's very deeply disappointed. And I think that was to do with the early release of the Kaipo information. The city plan release, you still haven't got any certainty over why or what that was done. And even today's paper about how you can't get the information on what the decisions were based on through that. What is your feeling, kind of in a global sense, when that shutdown comes like that?
In some respects, I know where the minister's coming from, and I know where government comes from. They love information to be carefully packaged, the press releases to be written, the letters to the residents to be written, everything to be lined up, the website to be perfectly suited, and everything's in a nicely wrapped up with a little bow, and we're all ready to go into the media and do it in one big hit. That's the way they like to do things. That's what they're used to doing. I think where we're breaking ranks with them is that, in the sense that I get, not only from our reporting, but our letters to the editor are really important to me in terms of gauging public mood, is that people are impatient, and the stress of waiting for information is becoming overwhelming for them. That the neat package doesn't necessarily work, that in fact what they would prefer is good information as soon as you can give it to us, even if it's not perfect and even if it's not 100%. Give me a sense of where we're going, give me a sense of what I'm facing. And really, in terms of Kaipo, that's what it boiled down to. And I said in the paper that, I was wrestling with that for for a good day and as to whether it was the right thing to publish, because I knew it would upset people in Kaiapoi. I knew this would be a slap in the face for them, that, you know, that if they hadn't put two and two together with Jerry Brownlee saying, you know, the sunken walls are off, that's not going to happen anymore, that meant that their area wasn't going to be remediated and they were going to be turned red. I turned to one of my colleagues who's in the red zone in Avonside, and I said, you know, if you've been through this, you know what it's like to sit there waiting. What would you want in this circumstance? And he said, you know, I felt a huge sense of relief when I knew a decision was about to be made and I was going to get a sense of my future. Any sense of information was important to me, and that's why I made the call.
So when you have a source or a piece of information, that's the type of weighing up you do about whether to run with something. And I mean, I'm not even talking about the Kaiapoi, but I'm talking about there's always sources of information that come into you. How do you weigh that up? You weigh that up on the impact? Do you weigh it up on the sensationalism? Do you weigh it up on, well, this will sell newspapers?
A bit of all of those, really.
Yeah.
First thing you weigh it up is it true? Yeah. Do you believe it to be true? Yeah. How good are the sources? How much independent verification has the reporter got? One source isn't enough. Have we cited the documents? Are we confident the documents are true? The second element is, what is the impact on the community? Is the information broad enough to be able to tell a proper story? Of course the commercial element comes into it. Am I going to sell papers out of this? How significant is this? It has to. That's part of my business. But you are weighing it up with the sensitivities of the audience. And if I can, I'll go to Pike River as another significant story. And the day that the families were told that there'd been another explosion and that there was no hope for the men. And astonishingly, the authorities told them that and then let the families walk straight onto the road where there's this army of photographers waiting to see what was happening. So these people in an extraordinarily distraught moment are right in the midst of the media. Of course, we had a photographer there. He took some amazing photographs of people in that moment of grief. Pretty much every other paper in the country used one of those photographs on the front page. I didn't. I went with the names of the people who died on the press because they're our people. And for them to be in that moment of grief and then to pick up the paper next day and see themselves in that way, I just thought would have been far too intrusive. So I backed away from that, let a great news photograph go for the sake of what that would have meant to the people.
Yeah, no, it's that very hard call. I think what we'll do when we come back after the break is that we'll look at transparency and open decision making, whether when you manipulate or you spin or you try to think you control the press, what that means in those processes. Welcome back, where I'm talking to Andrew Holden, Newspaper of the Year editor. Right, we've just briefly discussed about spin, or I call it spin, or controlled releases to the media. I wonder whether we run the risk of undermining the role of being transparent when decisions are made, whether we're open, or whether we get any balance to, especially in a political level, whether it be the government or local government. Are we running a risk now if we allow this type of manipulation to continue?
I think so. But you've got to understand, I mean, as a journalist, I come from a fundamental viewpoint of publish and be damned, that the more information out there, the better. As a fundamental of democracy, voters need to have the information to make the judgment. So I've never been a fan of government saying, we have the information, trust us that we're making the right call, and maybe down the track we'll let that information out and you can see that it was the right decision to be made. That's always difficult. In the extraordinary circumstances we are here in Canterbury at the moment, I think the more information you can give people, the better. I mean, just have a look at, you know, the Ask an Expert column we run in the paper. You know, just this extraordinary flood. And I do feel sorry for the science community for saying, yes, we'll do it, because they're being bombarded with information. But there's a massive appetite from people to understand what's happening in their community. And that's why I think, you know, and why we've asked for the land information that's, you know, underpinning the decisions around the red zone from the minister, to get that out to the community to say, well, you've got your suspicions. You know, you're sitting in a street saying that side's red and this side's green and I don't understand why the two. Show me what you've done to make that judgment, and then I can be confident that it was a good decision. So when the minister says, no, that's too hard and we won't do that and we'll release it in time when it suits us, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good thing for the community.
From the feedback that you're getting from the community, because sometimes I feel that the press has almost become a little bit like a talkback with its letters to the editor.
Yeah.
That hunger that they seem to have for that information, and you've used a really good example in that Ask the Experts. Do you think that if we continue to deny them the information, then decisions are going to be made going forward that could be made at their peril?
I think so. I think probably the greater danger to me is that they will lose the community's real energy and appetite for the opportunity that we have. Because the sense I get from people, and we've seen it at that Ideas Expo with 10,000 people turning up, and I'm sure we'll see it with the response to the council's draft plan for the CBD. Fantastic energy from people to get in there, and the idea of, we've got a vision for the city, we've got this extraordinary opportunity to rebuild our city and rethink our city, and we want to be part of that. What worries me is that you don't give them information to make intelligent choices around that. You push them away from that process. What you'll lose is you'll just turn them off. They'll become disaffected, they'll lose that energy. Then the danger becomes they don't care, they leave, they're not happy. And if you're a politician, what does that mean to you? Well, the election's only a few months away. Significantly, it could affect the National Party vote, and that could throw them into coalition with a number of people they don't necessarily want to be in a coalition with.
Well, just going back that step, the city plan, which you were denied, I mean, it's a legal process that all councils, not just the city council, has to follow.
Yeah.
How concerned would you be in the legislation that we are working in Canterbury, and there's quite good examples, and it was the Minister Brownlee that said, if there's a gap in the Act alone that makes it difficult for the council, well, we can ignore it and we'll plug that gap.
Yeah.
I mean, from a journalistic point of view, that's got to be incredibly dangerous, doesn't it? Because it denies you the right to information.
But isn't it a nonsense? I mean, how do you turn around and fix the Act later and take it through select committees and, just because you didn't like it at the time? I mean, it's in the Act. It's part of local government legislation because you want all councils to follow that process. It's not just about Canterbury.
Why did this... Well, I think I know the answer, but I won't... Is it wrong or right of the council to say we wanted to maximise the opportunity, the press and all of the media, the TV and the radio, to have a stage show, as opposed to maybe what the question I need to ask you is, do you lose your competitive edge if they change the rules to suit everybody?
No, not really. I mean, I think, they were caught in a bind there, weren't they? Because if they took it public excluded, which was the other option.
Why did they need to take it public excluded?
Because that way they don't have to put the document up 48 hours before on the agenda, right? So if they take it public excluded, the public is going to say, well, the press is going to come along and say, here you are, you're doing it in secret yet again. You've got to have a reason to go into
secret, and it wouldn't have cut the mustard.
This comes back to that cultural transparency, doesn't it? And that ability to go out and say to the public, look, we're going to do it this way. And this is why we're going to do it. And the same as the government did around the red zone. Look, the reason we're holding off on the decision on red zone is we want to be able to give you some clear direction on what's going to happen to your property. How is it going to be paid for? What's insurance going to do? I understood that. I understood exactly why the government wanted to do that. That's an understandable process. In this case, arguably, they were probably better off saying, look, the city plan's ready, we're going to publicly exclude it. This is why, because we want to, bring it out with the big fanfare and show everybody. Do I lose from a competitive advantage? TV's never going to do the detail that the press can do around that plan. They're never going to do the graphics we're going to do. So, that sort of fluffery doesn't worry me, because I know at the end of the day, the press has a job to do for its community. It's got the space to do it. We're going to do it anyway.
So if you're trying to do that, the news versus the information and the photo ops, can they have their cake and eat it too? Because of course they want you all to turn up and be on the front page with the jackets on and digging the holes. But the community want the balance. Do you have the obligation to ensure that happens?
Oh, we're always obligated to do the balance. I mean, it's can they have their cake and eat it too? The problem is that you've got the media there like little mice nibbling away at the cake before it's ready to be unveiled. We're running around the side, we're having a little bit of a nibble as much as we can. That's our job. is to sniff out information. Our job is to challenge and test the information the decision's made upon. And if government won't release the information, to see if we can get it from another source to confirm that, in fact, that's the right decision, or we'll let the community decide. To me, one of the silly things, in some respects, is the argument should never be between a government and a media outlet. At the end of the day, it's really about the audience, the reader at the end, or the resident in this case. That's what the real business is about. There shouldn't be a spat between governments and the press. We're both in the business of giving the best information we can to the people who live here and who've got to make those decisions. So if that means we're having an argument over when information is released or whether it should be released, to me, that's a bad result on behalf of the people of Christchurch.
Gosh, it's going to be a good place.
I mean, it's great for news.
Yeah.
It's great for me. It's great for headlines,
yes.
and our reporters can, whack them over the head with OIAs and all the rest, and we're having a great old time. But is it really serving our community well?
Absolutely. Well, I don't think so, but I think we might come back after this break and talk about Rupert Murdoch then.
Oh, okay.
Welcome back, where we're talking media, in particular the press. Does the Fairfax that you work under have any link or any influence on what can or cannot be published, either in a local sense, a national sense or an international sense?
No.
So there's no hindrance?
No, there's no political agenda I have to follow. There's no... No, I mean, where they influence me is that it's a business, so it has a budget. I have targets to achieve, obviously with circulation and readership, which influences what I might put on the front page, how we'll take the paper. I am part of the senior management group of the press, so the profit and loss performance of the paper is part of my responsibility. So I need to be aware of its commercial success. That tension might occur where I've got a story that could be damaging of a local business that's a significant advertiser. That's probably where it gets a little bit crunchy. But to be honest, in my near 4 years as editor and my predecessor as 6, all he's ever needed to do is go to the GM and say, you need to be aware that we've got a story on so-and-so and we're publishing it tomorrow. If you want to go and warn them, or you want to warn your advertising manager that this is going to have a problem, that's up to you, but we're going to do it.
There are many that think the press is a very conservative newspaper. Yes?
Well, yeah, I would think so, yeah. But what I'd argue is...
Is that because of the history?
Yeah,
or?
It's partly history, but partly reflective of its community.
Yeah.
I mean, the sense I get from Christchurch is it's a relatively conservative community in terms of its social values, its economies, a pretty staid one with a significant around the primary industry. We're not a tabloid paper by any means. We're quite cautious. I wouldn't disagree with that. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, stuff the pad on that one. Well, let's go to the News Corporation, Rupert Murdoch, and some very unethical practices there. What is your take on that? I mean, how could that possibly have happened?
Oh, that's a straight out cultural. Oh no, it's a straight out cultural thing. It's a highly competitive media environment where if you win, you get all the rewards, and where breaking rules doesn't matter so long as you win. Sadly, Murdoch's built that culture within his organisation for most of his career, and I see aspects of it in other parts of his empire. In Australia, for example, so the papers over there will do things that I would question ethically. You get into a situation like London where it's an unbelievably competitive environment, and the word is get the story. If phone hacking's one way to do it, that doesn't surprise me at all. I'm just waiting for the real revelations about who really knew it, because they must have known. I mean, as an editor, if you've got an astonishing scoop and you don't ask how they got that information, well, you should be sacked for that anyway.
So there's been a little bit here, and it's gone off. No, Button's taken it off the agenda because she doesn't. It's like leaked copies of confidential information from the council. I mean, it's like, are they being naive? I mean, wake up. This isn't new, and there's different reasons and there's different why people do that.
Yeah.
When that happens here in Canterbury, what's your take on a confidential document that's leaked to you?
In terms of whether I would publish it or not, well, again, is it true? Is it in the public interest, which could be pretty broad depending on your interpretation of it? Absolutely. If it explains the decision-making of the council and what's going on in the council, I think I'm obligated to run it. I think where I've got to be careful is that everybody has an angle. There is no human being in the world who is utterly objective in the information they give to you or what they say to you. Everybody's got a self-interest. I mean, you've got to acknowledge that. So if somebody's leaking you something, it's because they want you probably to hurt someone else. So you've got to think, well, am I being played for a fool here? Or, you know, is that unreasonable what's being leaked, or are they only giving me selected pieces and in fact it's not the true story of the advice that's been given in the case of the conflict of interest with the council? You know, so you've got to constantly be thinking, what's the angle and what's the flip side? What will the other person deserve to say in counter to that?
So when we talk about with the City Council, that haven't they gone quiet just at the moment, is that do you believe, I mean, you've got some reporters now really onto it. I mean, well, because they lost ECAM, which was such good fodder for them.
I know.
And they've gone to the City Council, which is quite good that they deserve that scrutiny and have a look. Are you surprised at some of the stories or some of the decision-making or the lack of transparency in some of the process? Are you surprised in that?
Not entirely. I thought it was always going to be a tricky group of councillors because there were some returned who were supportive of the previous regime, if you like, or the way things were done. You've got some who deliberately voted on to stir that up and change it. You've got a council with a track record around process that can be questionable. No, I'm not surprised.
It's going to be interesting watching as city plan and the bigger part of the city. What concerns you as an editor? You know, you have to be a leader in the community at the moment and a conduit for information. What are your major concerns at the moment?
I think probably probably that it's a long game. This is not an easy thing to get back on our feet from. This is a generational task for the city. There are no quick fixes here. And so I think it's people's patience and understanding, and I guess that's, from my perspective, where more information and pushing that element of, you know, we can't resolve the CBD in 3 months, we can't resolve all the housing in 6 months, that it's going to take some time, will help people appreciate and garner their energies for the task ahead. So I think that is one of the elements that I'd hope the paper gives a sense of how big the task is. In terms of the community, just back to what I was saying before, you don't want to lose their engagement. I mean, there's such an extraordinary energy out there and a passion for the city, and a remarkable opportunity too to be quite visionary. You don't want to lose that, and that's why, you know, when the Minister comes out and says, look, the red zone along the Avon, will probably resell that down the track. No, you're not. Come on, be visionary. Gift it to the people of Christchurch. Say that's going to be yours. The government's never going to ask to resell that land. That's yours. Do something unbelievable with you that will define this city as one of the positive things that comes out of it.
It's a really good place to stop. And also, I think that you had a staff member that won the Photographer of the Year as well. Well done, the press, and that's it for One on One.